What's up, guys? So today I want to go over a few knots. I feel like these are the 3 knots, in my opinion, that are probably most essential if you're going to get into the lineman trade. Especially, you're going to need to know 8 or 9 knots plus eye splice, midline splice, and a crown splice. But these 3 knots that I want to go over are probably the most applicable knots in really any application in life. You know, camping, hunting, doing yard work, tying something down in the back of your truck, line work, other trades. I'm sure you probably use these knots maybe. I don't really know because I don't have experience in those trades. But these are the 3 knots that I feel like are really handy to know how to tie. So I'm not an expert in tying knots, so this is how I tie them. There's probably there's other ways to tie them. These are what I found just work the best way for me to tie them. So let's hop right into it. And the first knot I'm going to go over, and I feel like it's probably one of the most important knots, is the bowline. So this is a bowline. This is how I tie it, just like so. So that right there is a bowline, and as you can see, it's pretty proficiently tied that pretty easily. So I'll kind of go into a step-by-step of how I tie the bowline, how to tie it. It's just a knot that is really good for needing a loop and a rope. It's a very strong knot, and the cool thing about a bowline is this little loop at the bottom right here is, no matter how tight this knot gets, you can always loosen this little loop and the knot loosens up. So it's not a knife knot, which some people, you'll tie a knot and the only way to get it out is by cutting it with your knife. Those are called knife knots. You don't want those kind of knots. So professionally learn how to properly tie a bowline or any knot in general, so you don't tie a knife knot and you have to cut your rope in order to get the knot apart. It's not the right way. So step 1, tying a bowline. You're gonna have your tail end right here, and then you're gonna have your fall line, which is the long part of the other end of the rope that goes all the way to wherever, to China. So I'm right-handed, so I always start with the tail in my right hand and the fall line in my left hand. So all I do is I cross it like so, and then I pinch it, and then I just rotate my hand. And it creates something that looks like that, right? So this is going to be your loop for the knot. This is your tail. It's basically an overhand loop. So once you have that, then you just take the tail, you wrap it around the fall line, and then you put it back in through the loop. And you cinch it down. And that right there is your bowline. It's a very handy knot to know how to tie, especially if you need a loop at the end of your rope. So another way to know how to tie this, I showed you the way I usually tie it, where I just do that. This is the other way. So you can always take your fall line and then your tail here, and you can make a loop like so, right? So your fall line's on the bottom, right? And then you can just come up through the bottom with your tail around the fall line and back through. And that does the same exact thing. But I'm so used to tying it the way I've been tying it for years that I just tie it like this because it's muscle memory and it's very easy. But there's multiple ways to skin a cat, and this is the way I skin my cat, is by doing it that way. So I'll show that to you guys again. So you can take your fall line, you make your loop, take your tail, come up through the bottom, around the fall line, and back in, cinch it down. So you're bowling. So now I want to show you, this application is where you're going to use the bowline the most, is if you got to tie around something. So take your fall line, take your tail. Like I said, since I'm right-handed, I always put the tail in my right hand. So if I need to tie around an object, I will sometimes either just let this float or keep it in my right hand because I'm pretty proficient. And then I just do an overhand loop. So the fall line is on top of your loop line. And when you do that, if the fall line is on top of the loop line, you take your tail and you go down through the hole, around the fall line, and back up through the hole. And that creates your bowline, as you can see. And this is doggone strong. You want to loosen it, you just loosen that up, and then you're good to go there. So I'll show that to you guys again. So I want to tie around something. I can just let that float, and I can make an overhand loop, the fall line on top, or you can do the fall line on the bottom. Just remember, whatever side the fall line is on, that's the side you have to go in with your tail. So if we go with the fall line on the bottom, then I got to come up through the bottom with my tail, around the fall line, and back up through the loop. And that's going to tie my bowline as well. But I'm so used to doing it the other way, that way doesn't even feel right. So make a loop with the fall line on top, take my tail, go down through the top of the loop, around the fall line, back up through the loop, cinch it down, and you have your bowline.